Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Table Manners for Robots. Super excited about this particular episode. This is all about POPIA. Now, I get it. A lot of us are talking about POPIA right now. There's just so much content floating around on social media and even the press to do with this topic that sometimes it seems a bit of an overkill. We get a little bit of content fatigue when we see the same thing too much. And honestly, I'm experiencing the same thing. And here we are putting together a show about POPIA and the implementation thereof. So why is this important? Well, as a starting point, I myself am an information officer. So I know the risks that I carry and some of the threats that I need to overcome in order to ensure that my obligations are fulfilled as an information officer. And so in doing my own work in this area to protect the data that we are entrusted with as an organization, I've had many questions. POPIA is a very comprehensive and extensive undertaking. It is not a small responsibility for companies, no matter the size. It doesn't matter what your capacity is. The operational requirements are quite burdensome. So what we've done for this particular show is that we were able to partner with a global powerhouse, McAfee, yet again, and speak to two of their very senior experts. We were able to, secure some global input on this particular topic, because while POPIA is relevant to South Africa, the truth is the subject of data protection is very relevant worldwide, and POPIA just happens to be our version of how we are applying data protection policies locally. So on that note, I'm very happy to introduce our expert guests who are going to give us the perspective of POPIA below just the superficial, what meets the eye of the outsider view. So we're going to be able to just dig a little bit deeper, look beyond just the superficial compliance to POPIA, and see what we actually need to do behind the scenes from a back office point of view to make sure that we're doing things right. So on that note, let's go to some inserts from our expert guests and hear a little bit more about their background.
Yeah, hi. First of all, in my background, I start mathematics, advanced mathematics today. It was in 98 before actually joining the first cybersecurity school in France. It was in 2000. So I was super excited, right? Because a new world war was coming to us. I remember the first engine we used to connect to the internet was Alta Vista. And I was absolutely impressed about the tons of new information we were able to capture. I remember also 20 past years ago, actually, we used to connect through modem, right? Remember 56,000 volts. And it was the beginning of a new story. At the same time, I was a little bit scared about what could we expect in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of hacking. What could we expect in terms of new technology adoption for many companies? And this is actually what's happening today, right? So engineering school for 3 years before being enrolled by an encryption provider. Was a company called Seboot, acquired by McAfee a couple of years back. And I'm still excited, actually, right? Even after 20 years, no loss in motivation. Everything, every new day, every new thing to discover, to challenge with. And I think, yes, this is where my motivation comes. Curiosity, innovate, and being a big role in that cybersecurity industry to help partners, customer from a visionary perspective. Yeah, so that's me.
Hi. Mo Cashman. Actually, so short for Maurice. A interesting story there. It's a French name, but my family has a Ukrainian background, so that's something for another time, I guess. But for my background, I guess you can describe it in two ways. One is, I've pretty much been in security in some way or form my whole life. starting with the Army, leading troops and, going, peacekeeping missions and, just protecting, always protecting something. And, that led into, cybersecurity, working for one of the first, CERT teams out there back in the day before we had the term cyber even, right? So that was, it was all about information security and protection. It's all about security, helping, businesses and government be secure, protecting data, from external attackers. And the other part of my background is in travel. I've spent 50% of my life outside of the United States, both in travel for the military, but mainly as in working in security, either design or management of teams, leadership of teams in cybersecurity, and now with McAfee and privileged to be have a great role and a great team, working with guys like Laurent or Lo, if I might say correctly, and a host of other people really passionate about cybersecurity and data protection in general, because it's all about keeping people safe, and I think that's been a mission for for a couple of years, for a long time for me.
All right, so that's us getting to know our expert guests a little bit better for now. So if you've just joined us, remember that what we do here is we play a whole bunch of inserts that have been pre-recorded over the last couple of days. This is all fresh content, but the actual insert, the actual interview aspect, that is an insert that has been pre-recorded. But what we do during the live show is we welcome your questions, your input, your participation through the chat box, through the Q&A box, and we line up the relevant piece of content that's going to answer your question. So absolutely, through the life of the show, participate, put your questions and comments through, and we're going to address them, take them up. We'll discuss them as much as we possibly can during the course of the show. All right, so now we went back to our special guests and we asked them to just deep dive a little bit into their backgrounds to understand what made them specialize in the areas that they have.
I think it goes back to to your own mission, right? And I really think that one of my core missions is to help people be more resilient, or help organizations be more resilient to get through those tough times, or to operate through different sorts of risks, right? So that they can continue to live on or continue to prosper. So that really motivates me, right? And that's really the mission there is to cybersecurity is an output of that, right? And is part of that mission, because it's so important today, because it's not new anymore, right? So to 30 years into this type of career, we can no longer say it's new, but it's one of those areas that keeps evolving. New attack surfaces, new things from the attackers to keep up with. So it never stops, right? It's a constant evolution, and that keeps you motivated. You combine the sort of challenges that customers face, organizations face, or people face, because it's very personal. Also, the cybersecurity part, protecting your own personal data. When you combine that, the mission and the evolution, it's something that just keeps you moving forward every day. And having worked with Laurent for several years now, I can really attest to his motivation and strength in this field. So yeah.
Actually, I was young. I had two dreams, or let's say one. The first was to become military pilot, right? And for some reason, I was not about to access that dream. And it's even today, I got a pilot license, so I'm okay. I'm happy with that. And finally, after that deception, right? I have to think, hey, what can you keep you motivated? What can you keep you learn? What can you keep you excited? And again, cybersecurity was something very new for a lot of people, for me first. And I think that cybersecurity is a vast topic, right? Data protection, encryption technologies, cloud protection, IoT protection, SecOps. It's like a doctor, right? You get a lot of specialties. So I decided to embrace the the encryption specialty, right? I discovered very new things, especially with my mathematics expert background. Encryption was new, let's say, in the continuity of my background, encryption was almost natural, right? So I spent some years in that space, and which were super, let's say, excited. So I would say it helped me to embrace a more global data protection domain expertise. And today I'm 41. I'm still super happy to deliver my advices, my recommendation to analyze the gaps, technology, compliance, governance gaps in order to improve the data protection, let's say, policies and technology our customer are onboarding today.
That's, I thought my comment just I on that piece as well. When you think about your specialization, sometimes you go into things very deliberately. And I think personally, I think I went into it accidentally. As you get an opportunity to work in a field, and then it becomes about the people that you work with, perhaps, or the leaders that you have, and the mission that you have, and that keeps you, that gets you excited and drives you in the different directions. And I think that's what happened, to me, and particularly focusing in on security operations, and you're really being able to hunt, detect, and find attackers, in the midst of their business. That really gets me, really excites me, really keeps me motivated as well. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're getting a lot of good introductions there, really getting to know our guest speakers super well. If you've just joined the show, welcome. We're talking POPIA. We are talking about, going below just the superficial compliance to POPIA, really looking at some of the detail behind the scenes, what's expected of us that we might not always see at first glance. Remember that the show is all about your participation, so feel free to add your comments, your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A box. You can do so at any point, and what we're going to do is we're going to try our best to line up the most appropriate insert to answer your question. So this show ultimately is directed by you. It is defined by your participation. So the more you ask, the more the chances are that you're going to see content that is relevant to your situation. All right, so for the next particular insert, we decided to look at the context in South Africa right now. Obviously, South African businesses are going through quite a lot, and we asked our expert guests what they think about that.
That's real good questions. And let me explain my thoughts in three parts. First, POPIA, regulation is coming, right? Regulation has come in South Africa. Think about what happened from the 1st of July that year in South Africa. Today, almost 5 million of citizens, of people cannot register on the EVDS system, right? Based on the, let's say, the regulation, the government regulation to fight the COVID. At the same time, what does it mean from a data protection, from a cybersecurity perspective? What could be the impact, and what could be the challenge for, first, any South African individuals, but more generally for any companies? Names, ID numbers, cell phone numbers, medical aid numbers will be part of that new record. So I think there is a big challenge in making sure that not any of this information could be captured by the bad guys. And I think this challenge is right now in South Africa. And this is our job, right? To assist partners, customer, in order to make sure this system could be adopted by any organization in a most secure way. Number two is, let's say, from a general cybersecurity statements. The global ranking in South Africa is 59th among 182 countries, right? And on the African continent, South Africa is placed at the 8th place. What does it mean? It means that investment in cybersecurity has started, right? Definitive. Is it enough? I don't think so, right? what does it mean? There is a gap today between the security, let's say, targets any company should think about, and the reality. The reality is today, I think ransomware attacks, I think that's loss of or exfiltration of data is something we could be scared of, right? So it's not a good time to stop. I think it's a good time to accelerate the investment any South African company are doing on the cybersecurity space. And finally, number 3 is regarding SecOps, right? SecOps is about let's say, about the processes, about the technology, about the tool companies, enterprising are using to detect and to remediate threats. I think that's what's happening today in South Africa is that there is sometimes a lack of maturing, right, in terms of how proactive you could be versus reactivity, in terms of what we call alert fatigue, right? Too many noise, too many, and let's say, not important incidents means that if you don't manage that kind of fatigue, you force any SecOps team to focus or to work on every piece of incident, anomaly, events. So I think there is a chance, there is an opportunity today to merge workflows, to merge tools, to merge a technology with the solely objective to be more efficient from a SecOps perspective. Too many environment, too many security tools, right? And I think that's the lack today, because more you get, many people think better they will do. And that's absolutely not the case. So I think that's thinking open platform, thinking integration, thinking comprehensive set of tools will definitively have to improve the current SecOps strategy for a lot of different companies in South Africa. Again, that's not typical to South Africa, right? We see a lot of enterprise, even in Europe, even in United States, that are facing still the same challenges, right? So I think my point number 3, again, is not targeting only South Africa. It's more general statement.
Yeah, very, very, very much agree, Laurent. It's the situation in South Africa is typical of other locations, globally, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. And you can, all the incidents you've seen of late, are testament to that we need to improve our processes, in particular as it comes to securing our critical systems, and data is really a critical asset these days. And being able to secure that and protect it from things like ransomware, which is essentially unlawful destruction and unauthorized access to your data. So definitely agree that we can improve all over the world.
All right. So, we're really getting into the content here. We're really getting into the meat of the show. If you've just joined us, please ensure that you keep your questions coming through, keep your comments coming through. We will be sure to take up everything that you say during the show, time permitting. So the sooner you put your question forward, the sooner you put your comment forward, the better it is for us. Then that way we can pretty much assure you that we're going to line up just the right content for you. All right. Now, as an information officer myself, and specifically as someone who's very marketing inclined, in fact, I consider myself a marketing technologist. My focus is on using technology to deliver marketing goals and growth goals, So as someone who wears that hat for my client organizations together with our own organization, for me, it is vital that I focus on the whole concept of direct marketing consent when it comes to POPIA. However, the reality is that POPIA extends to so much more than just direct marketing consent. There's a lot more to it than just this high-level aspect. And I know that, like me, a lot of you out there are perhaps also focusing primarily on the whole concept of consent when it comes to POPIA. If that is the case, let us know through the chat box. Let us know through the Q&A box whether you agree, whether you disagree. Let me know where you stand on that point. But while I was investigating this with our expert guests, I was probing very cleverly to ensure that they tell me what their perspective is. Let's see what they have to say.
This is a great question, because I think that, well, first off, there's 8, I think, standards or 8 sections, within POPIA itself, with data subject participation or the consent part being just one of them, right? There's seven others about, all around, like things like processing limitations, minimizing, what type of data you have, the quality of information, creating accountability requirements, and really, I think what's the 2 biggest important things out of this that really paint the big picture is the culture, improving overall cybersecurity. So the security safeguards, the regulation, if we call it that, the act doesn't say you have to put this tool in place or that process in place. It says apply the appropriate technical countermeasures. And what that forces organizations, people, processors, cloud service providers to do is think very broadly about their security architecture, which includes technology, processes, and everything associated with securing the data. Think about, the attackers, how they're going to get after it, what are the different risk conditions. So it really breeds that risk assessment, risk mitigation culture, which I think is essential to improving overall cybersecurity. A lot of times, we only focus on the technical pieces of things, but really that culture of risk management, risk assessment, and security architecture is really what's needed to defend and protect your data. So I think that the improving overall cybersecurity by creating that culture of risk management, and equally important, a culture of accountability amongst the holders of data, the processors of data, the owners of data. Everyone has a stake in protecting your data. It's my personal data. I'm responsible for what I do with it. I want to know who's processing it. I want to know what they're doing with it. I want to know how they're protecting it. And the same thing for organizational data, to take a broader perspective here. What are we doing with it? Where is it? How do we protect it? So, and what happens if we don't protect it appropriately? So the regulatory power of the government to create the accountability and force change is very, very powerful. And we've seen that in other parts of the world. In GDPR, best example, using very similar language. California Privacy Act, also very similar language in driving accountability, driving risk management, and overall improving security for very critical assets. In this case, data, but you can apply that to other aspects of your personal life as also to businesses. So to me, I think that's the big picture that we're after here.
Maybe one comment regarding the unique opportunity in South Africa to benefit the experience European company had to face, or a couple of years back, right? I think it was in 2018, the very beginning of the GDPR. As Mo said, GDPR and POPIA are very similar. There are some minor differences, but I think that 4 years back, Europe was a mess. Believe me, was a mess. So many companies totally afraid, totally lost about the processes, about the control, about the safeguards, about everything to comply with GDPR. So I think today South Africa can benefit such experience. I think the best possible experience comes from bad experience European country used to face a couple of years back. So we do have today, I think, a good piece of information in order to adapt current workflow. We know are working in order to help to assist any South Africa customers, companies to achieve this compliance criteria. So as Mo said, there is a lot of different topics POPIA touched on, right? Accountability, you said that, Mo. Openness, security safeguard, data subject participation, which was the initial question. Is it the only thing to consider? Definitively short answer is no. There is much more. My last point will be, what are the requirements from a big picture perspective? Is the technology enough or not? I would say no. I would say that 70, 80% deal with processes, deal with governance policies. And the tooling, the cybersecurity solution, will support that processes, will support with agility, with speediness, or any company can achieve that requirement. And I think that's something which is important. Consider both the processes and the technology solution. Nothing could be achieved just with the technology. Nothing could be achieved only with processes. Obviously, you need to consider a mix, and a good mix.
All right, so quite a lot of comment coming through. Obviously, we're still discussing at that process level, but you can see a lot needs to be done in order to get things working right. If while you're listening to this discussion, you feel, wow, I need to just find out a little bit more, I feel I want to double click in a particular area, feel free to just let us know while the show is happening. But you're not limited to that. You're not just limited to asking questions in the here and now. Feel free to just reach out and connect. We will place a link now into the chat box, and that's your webinar feedback link. You can use that obviously to give us feedback, but also use that as a vehicle to reach out to me to find out, if you have any follow-up questions, if you would like me to follow up directly with you, if you're interested in perhaps reading more, getting more information from a credible source, if you would like a little bit of guidance in a particular area and you just don't want to navigate this through a whole bunch of Google searches, if you just like a little bit of human help, we follow up with every bit of webinar feedback directly. My team and I respond to everyone who reaches out to us, so you can expect a phone call if you do need one, and we will be sure to line up the most relevant provider to help you solve that need. So on the subject of going deeper now on the whole subject of this POPIA thing, one of the first questions that sprung to my mind when I was interviewing our guests was that, hold on, we're using big name reputable cloud providers, because a big aspect of what was talked about just now was this whole concept of where are we processing our data? Who are the suppliers that we use, where we are exchanging data with them, we're placing data on their platforms, and so we are trusting them with the data processing. But surely, if we are using the big names, the reputable names, the Microsofts, etc., surely our POPIA requirement is fulfilled by default. Is it though? Let's find out.
That's a great question. Let me take an analogy. When you buy a car comes with security belts, comes with airbags. Does it mean that you will be 100% sure to avoid an accident? Answer is not. You keep responsible for sitting with your security belt, but to make sure that your car is in good conditions, right? It's not because you buy a big name that you will be 100% secure. And that absolutely is the same with cloud. Think about people or companies, enterprise onboarding big names such as Microsoft Office 365, right? As per the shared responsibility model, that's important to mention that model. Model is to tell who is responsible for what, the subscriber, or is it relying on the provider? Think about SaaS applications, right? For SaaS application, you as a subscriber responsible for the data. You keep responsible for ensuring the security policies in order to prevent confidential or proprietary data to be shared with someone else without any reason. That's a typical example. So it's a bit more complex when it comes to discuss IaaS or PaaS or infrastructures or platforms, because you get more responsibility, you as a subscriber. Obviously, AWS, obviously Google Cloud, GCP, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure will ensure that the data centers, the servers, the hardwares, they operate to to sell or to provide their cloud services is free of any security vulnerabilities. That's not the same for all of the resources you as a customer are spinning up in the infrastructure. Let me think about virtual machines, right? In AWS, we call that EC2 Elastic Compute. You're responsible for the configuration of the EC machine. You keep responsible for the network policy, the firewall policy. You keep responsible for securing the volume attached to the EC. You keep responsible for managing the IAM permissions for the people supposed to connect to that virtual environment in the cloud. So for IaaS and PaaS platform, you absolutely need to refer to the shared responsibility model. And back to the initial question, which was, is it okay to trust a big name? No, assuming that you keep responsible for most of the stacks in infrastructures, and you keep responsible for the data every time you're onboarding a SaaS application.
All right. So we have a question here from Kyle. Kyle says, thank you. My big questions are around auto consent and automatic cookie blocking prior to consent, etc. So very much cookie policy stuff. All right. So Kyle, on that, just so you're tracking here, no pun intended. I just thought of it after I said that. You know, we are trying deliberately for this show to steer a little bit away from the consent stuff, because typically that's where the bulk of the POPIA worries and stresses are right now. People are pretty much focusing almost entirely on consent. And we deliberately wanted to show what's behind consent, like how much more do we need to deal with when it comes to POPIA that extends beyond just consent. So I tell you what we're going to do in your case, Kyle, if you wouldn't mind just clicking the link provided in the chat and completing a webinar feedback form, I will be sure to follow up with you after this webinar. We'll have someone call you and we will definitely get you some help after this show. So please be sure to leave a request in the webinar feedback, and I personally commit to getting back to you. All right. So on that note, I do have some other questions coming through, but I'm going to tackle them in a second. For now, I did challenge our speakers a little bit, you know, because obviously they gave very good information about what we need to do with our data processes. You know, either the data processes or the data operators. You can use either term, meaning the people who are operating or processing data on our behalf. Like, what is it that we need to do with them? I wanted to, you know, challenge our speakers a little bit. And, you know, I shared a very valid, real frustration, a day-to-day frustration that we face. And that is that, you know, we've now got to take responsibility for what our cloud providers are doing and how they are doing it. We are now having to extend our sphere of influence all the way into their operational centers. And we have to look at what their processes are. And it's really a lot to manage. And I mean, if you're a small to medium business, it can be quite burdensome with a small workforce to be extending one's reach so far deep into the supply network. So I challenged our speakers with that question, and let's hear what they had to say.
Yes, and I know it's sometimes scary, right? I know it's a lot of information, it's a lot of resources, it's a lot of assets to manage. Given the fact that you're already managing on-prem assets, you're already managing on-prem resources. So I think that in order to avoid a kind of storm, or let's call that a vortex of different policies, different criteria, because the modern IT architecture is exploding, right? I think that we need to drive consistency. We need not only to consider single cloud application or single cloud infrastructure. If you may have some people trying to focus first on AWS only, but think about what will be the situation, what will be the statement in the next 12 months. And I really bet that the same customer will get back to us saying, I today have much more than only one provider for infrastructures in the cloud. So I think that we need to build security policies. We need to build compliance policies in order to be applicable to any kind of assets any company are running today. What does it mean? It means that multi-cloud, hybrid cloud security is something which is a key word, right? Consistency in the policy, consistency in how we can detect POPIA related or more generally any confidential information wherever the data is, on the laptop, on on-prem data centers, in S3 buckets in AWS, or in blob storage in Microsoft Azure, or in any other cloud application, SaaS application company are massively used today. So I think, yeah, consistency is probably the best, or let's say the most suitable word which could solve what you're describing, a data storm.
I agree, Laurent. Really strong commentary. I think about that responsibility, you know, and you as an owner of data, as an owner of assets, you know, you can never really give away your responsibility, right? You have to know where that is and where it's going, and who has a handle on it, because ultimately it's you know, the organization or the person is the owner of that data. And it brings in an interesting piece. Today we're very much interdependent on external providers, processors, or suppliers of things, whether it's IT supply chain or the OT supply chain, or in this case, cloud service providers as a part of the data supply chain, let's say, the data security, data processor supply chain. And you've seen a lot of threats recently about that. Maybe we can come to that in a second there. Maybe it might bleed into that next question.
All right, so we're getting some good action here, getting some good questions coming through, some nice comments. So let's tackle some of those. And I ask all of you here, to the best degree possible, submit your thoughts and comments live if you'd like them to be addressed during the course of the show. If you'd prefer to get some follow-up afterwards, feel free to complete a webinar feedback form. It's a very quick form. It's just a couple of fields, and it'll take you just a few seconds to complete it. And that way you can use that as a platform to reach out for some after-show follow-up. Kyle says here, it is important to verify that your privacy officer registration has been processed government side, South African government. Kyle, I'm assuming you mean the registration of the information officer. If you do succeed at registering the information officer, at the website, you will receive a certificate of confirmation, which can then be published at your own website. So it is pretty instantaneous to get that verification if you succeed at doing it online. I'm not entirely sure of the process when you submit for the application manually. So if you do it outside of the format of the online platform, I can't say what's going to happen there. I do know that there have been some challenges with the online platform. A number of people have said that there have been some bugs, and it's been a little bit laborious trying to make it work. And yes, there's been quite a lot of demand on that server. So my suggestion there is just to keep trying until you get that certificate issued to you. All right, we have Brendan here saying, hello, if a company has my data and is accordingly subject to POPIA, am I able to ask them for a copy of that POPIA policy within their organization? And are they obliged to share it with me? Or should they by default issue me with some form of disclaimer and view of the policy, or link to it at the outset of their policy deployment? Very, very good question there, Brendan. And absolutely, you are entitled under POPIA to understand how your data is being processed and what the process is behind the processing of your data. And that sits in the format of a manual, a PIA manual, officially a PIA manual, but now a lot of people are referring to it as the PIA and POPIA manual. That has to be publicly disclosed, so you'll find a lot of people are publishing that at their websites. And actually, if you would like a copy of that document, you can request it from the South African Human Rights Commission. It is actually your right to do so, and it is then incumbent upon the owner of the data, meaning the person that you shared your data with. They then then have to make sure that their manuals are submitted to the Human Rights Council for public availability. You will, however, have to pay for the printing of the manual, and then you can receive a hard copy. Otherwise, I'm sure a soft copy will suffice at the website itself. And absolutely go ahead and request that from any person that you've shared your data with. All right. So on that note, let's head back to our expert guests and hear what they have to say in response to me probing them about the real risks behind this whole POPIA pressure.
Yes, this is where business leaders they really want to understand what is at stake here. And honestly, if you go back to the last piece, there's a lot of risks that we face with this interdependent supply chain that we have, whether it's cloud or other areas. So that's a pain point, right? That's when you depend on others and their security is not up to speed or not appropriate, presents risk, for your business. So that's a tough one, right? The external responsibility for the supply chain, that's a real risk. And we've seen it manifest in the last 6 months, easily in the last 6 months, with things like Sunburst or DarkSide and similar types of supply chain breaches where those external providers were the weak points, let's say, or those external systems were the weak point that led to data being lost, destroyed, accessed, exfiltrated, as they say. So all of those things are real risks, meaning there's real attackers on the backside. And you've seen that particularly with ransomware. You've seen that there's an attacker on the other side of the line that wants money, and that really brings it home. It really makes the risk, feel real, right? And that's even more so, I think, than the fines, right? The government accountability penalties, let's say, or the penalties for not complying. There's a real, when you have to shell out the money to the government or to a regulator for not being compliant, that's a real risk, to your business. So both the attacker, the money that you have, and then finally, I think the reputation damage, right? Or perhaps even the impact to your own agility in adopting new things. Those are real risks. And today, the opinion of people you understand the opinion. News travels really fast. There's a 24/7 cycle. When something doesn't work, it's known, right? When something happens, it's known very, 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 very quickly. So the ability to control reputational damage and get in front of that, mitigate that risk is very, very difficult. And managing that, we'll say the PR risk of having a data breach or the reputational damage that might follow, that costs both real time and real money, and that's also has a real impact on your business. So I think when you come down to it, this is not just a in the ether type requirements. These are real risks, monetarily, reputation, to your actual business livelihood, or in the case of personal data in particular, people being resilient is tougher than businesses. So when you lose data or you lose access to things or your data is out there, that can come back to hurt that person in a very tangible way in the end, either through extortion, personal extortion, or other types of things that could happen based on the loss of that data. And you could go on and on with that part there.
All right, so a lot of good content coming through here. Let's see, we have a question from Norin. Hi, Kirushan. In the event where surveillance are available, like in some pharmacies where they have installed cameras, when they identified someone is committing fraud and they report it to the authorities, should they inform or get permission of the suspect before they can share the footage? What is the impact on POPIA in these types of cases? So firstly, Norin, great question, and I'm really glad that you're asking this. I myself had an incident recently where I walked into a store and I noticed that they were requesting that people lower their masks in order for the camera to get a good shot of their face as they're walking in. And then just, being someone who's very interested in the subject, I asked them, are they in fact making it known that this level of personal information, if you will, is in fact being captured? In such an instance, I would suggest, Norin, that you get more specialized or tailored advice, because this is, to me, quite a specialist situation, and it would require maybe the backing of someone who knows a little bit more about the subject. Definitely a very valid question. In my gut feel is that, the person would have to treat that as they would any personal information or personally identifiable information at this point, which would require that they treat it with the level of care that is expected of them within POPIA. So they would have to, in fact, disclose the processes, the flows, how the information is being treated, etc. However, like I said, that is a little bit more of a specialist question, and I definitely suggest that you let us know what help you need in, by completing a webinar feedback form. And for anyone on the show, if you have a specific question that is, quite specialized, just pop it into the webinar feedback form and let us follow up with you. We work with a number of very strong authorities and experts in the subject of POPIA. We partner with them, we work closely, we work hand in hand with them, so we can bring to bear relevant advice, suggestions, and follow-up with you in a very tailored way. It's so much better than just going and purely getting your information off of Google. Sometimes we do need that little bit of extra professional help to solve our particular situation. So on that note, we did take a look a few seconds ago. We looked at the risks, the real risks of this POPIA thing. But I challenged the speakers even further. I wanted to know, is it that, are these risks just scare tactics? Are there just a whole bunch of providers out there who are using these risks just to peddle their wares, or are these risks real? Let's see what they had to say.
Yes, I think that all companies are concerned, right? First, by regulation, whatever the size of the company is. I think also that any company today is a technology company. Think about the COVID-19 situation. Think about how the technology helped companies to mitigate the risk, closing the enterprise, right? I think that the technology is supporting the business. And today, any technology will be facing a lot of challenge from a cybersecurity perspective. The real question is how many of the technology we know does not using the technology? How many companies are not using technology at all? No one, right? None. So any company is concerned. You can get a few enterprises with a few of seats, few employees, up to, let's say, big accounts, right? As we used to support also banking, financial industries, government agencies, etc. So there is we cannot rely the risk, the impact on cybersecurity attacks or vulnerabilities based on who you are in terms of company. Any of company are concerned today.
I think you're right. Every company is there. Of course, companies that are quickly adopting cloud services and really having a multi-cloud approach, you need to take some particular, let's say, inspection of the regulation and how they're doing it. So the more complex, I guess, your cloud environment is, for one thing, or maybe even your supply chain for that matter, in this case, they probably have a harder time, right, with doing that. But at the same time, those smaller companies that might not have the people or the technology in place or even the processes ready, small companies can process a lot of data as well. So I think I agree that any company is at risk, but some of those larger companies with a multi-cloud complex environment, you need to start early in how they start to comply and what they're going to do.
All right, folks. So as you can see, we strive here to bring really good content to you from the mouths of experts from around the world. We are doing this here on African soil. We're a homegrown show. We're doing our best to get you good content at no charge. We form partnerships with best of breed providers from all around the world to ensure that our content is, superior. long story short. So it's very important that you support us in our quest in order to keep the show going and in order to grow it and expand it and make it even stronger. Please go ahead and support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You will find a link to the YouTube channel in our chat box. It's been put up there. So please go ahead and click that, and then we will just watch the numbers tally up. In terms of the discussion with our expert guests, we wrapped up with one very important question. And this was the question of who. At the end of the day, accountability rests on the shoulders of a few, and we are the ones that have to carry the can and take full accountability and ensure that the job is done. And it's no different in the world of POPIA. When it comes to the implementation, there are a few people who need to care more than others because we bear the brunt and we shoulder the burden of making sure that all the most important check boxes are in fact ticked. We took a little bit of a deep dive into this point. We looked very in depth at the who question, and I think you're going to get a lot from this.
That's a great question. A couple of before the GDPR, we and by the way, today with POPIA, we saw in the past very few data protection officer. So in the last couple of years, we see new roles emerging in companies such as data protection officer. However, who is responsible for protecting the data? Everyone, from the data protection officer, CISO, compliance officer. But I would say the most important people or individual in a company is a user to me, right? I think that data protection is not technology. I think that data protection is a pillar. Is a pillar you need to consider in how your company is managing the data, or your company is processing, storing data. And I think that even the technology can help you to mitigate some risk. Think about, again, sharing activities. Think about critical data stored in our open public S3 bucket in AWS. The technology will support that vulnerabilities or threat from a remediation perspective. But I think that education, I think that investing in making sure people, employees, understand what the best practices are is something which is important. And the technology can assist also, can support this very important piece, which is education, right? Let me give you an example, very practical, very funny example, actually. We every day we are in a rush, right? Every day, you, me, Mo, the team, everyone is dealing with data. We're dealing with data every day, every time. Sometimes you're in a rush, right? You don't want to take time to protect the information. And despite you get the tool saying for you or enforcing for you to apply a good or the correct classification to the data before being allowed to save the data, what will you do? You will click on the first option, not confidential, public, right? So I think the technology is also there to complement what people are doing with the data, even they understand what they should do. In terms of execution, people understand, but most of the time they don't follow the rule. So the technology is there to check what is the classification which has been applied to the data by the user, and to check if that classification meets the content of the data, right? Another example is, I'm a technology guy. I'm from cybersecurity, right? If you're giving to me a paper containing financial information, or I don't know, content related to fusion acquisition plan, probably I won't give you so much importance, despite the content is super important for the company. So the classification and how people giving the importance to the data must rely to their own business. And I think that it's a good start, right? To think about what the process is to protect the data. What are the different classification criteria? And to educate the people to apply the right classification to the document. Next, again, as I said before, on board the tool, the solutions, the cybersecurity protection in order to fill the gap between what is the current protection for given data versus what it should be, right? Again, we're supporting the business of manipulating, creating, storing the data, but obviously we see more and more threats related to the data, and most of them comes from unmanaged or let's say inappropriate security policies applied to the data. So controlling, enforcing, detecting, and correcting is something which is absolutely critical.
I think, Laurent, you covered a lot of pieces there. And I think in terms of other one or two other pillars, let's say, in terms of responsibility and who's really concerned about this. I think also the architects, right? The security architects in organizations, cloud architects, developers, all of them have an impact or have a role in helping organizations become compliant. In understanding what existing controls can do, understanding what they can do if you're a developer to minimize the use of private data in applications and the storage. So I think even when you get down into the design of different solutions, to the problem or how we might put technology to work here, and also building up new processes, definitely cloud security architects, I think, and developers you need to be concerned about this. From what are they going to do to how are they going to help the organization become compliant and in the end be more secure, which is really the end goal. Respect data and be more secure, or respect individuals, I should say, and individual data and be more secure in the end.
All right, folks, I really hope you enjoyed that. We had quite a lot of content shared today. And if you're still left wanting, which is good, it's expected. If you're left with a few questions, if you have thoughts about how you might proceed, what your options are, if you'd like a little bit of extra help, we're not limited to a specific type of help. We can recommend any number of options, solutions, possible partner interactions that you can follow up with us on. So I urge you to complete the webinar feedback form. Not only is it going to be important for some follow-up interaction, but most importantly, it tells us how you feel about the show, and it guides us in terms of how we continue to build and grow the show locally. And again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll find the link in the chat box. Very important for you to show us your support so we can keep growing our show and make it a local success. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time to participate and experience the show with us. We look forward to your ongoing feedback, commitment, and engagement into the future. And on that note, thank you again, and we will see you next time.